As I get older, I sometimes look back at the missed opportunities of obtaining a watch that was the zeitgeist of that era. One of them is the Tag Heuer Formula 1, originally released during the 1980s. They came in bright colours with plastic bezels, rubber straps and plastic coated cases, and if I remember correctly, they cost less than £100 at the time. That's a bargain by today's standards, but I was a student at the time and the opportunity to purchase one slipped through my hands. Heuer did end up re-releasing the Formula 1, but the updated version now costs over 15 times the price and lacks the charm and fun of the original. So I present to you today the Casio WS-1100H, which I think captures the original spirit and fun of the 1980s Casio Tag Heuer Formula 1, albeit in a digital format. You probably think that I've gone a little mad comparing a digital Casio to a Tag Heuer Formula 1, but hear me out. The Formula 1 was an entry-level watch, but the reissue is priced at over $1,500 so it can hardly be considered entry-level. The Casio, on the other hand, can be picked up quite easily for under $30 and so has more of a direct lineage. It also retains the colourful bezels and straps that make it pop on the wrist, plus it also has a plastic casing. The watch is available in two sizes, as a 38mm LWS-1100H and as a 43mm WS-1100H. My personal preference is for the smaller model, but that proved to be very difficult to obtain where I live, so I went for the larger WS-1100H. But whichever size you choose, they all come in a variety of colorways. It's not just the style that attracted me to the WS-1100 because it comes with some decent features too. Standard Casios are rated as being water resistant, but Casio have stuck their necks out and given this a WR rating of 100 meters. Battery life is also decent, as it would last for up to 10 years on a single CR2025 cell. The display is divided into 4 sections by the faceplate. Date window at the top, time display in the middle and the moon phase and tide graphs at the bottom. The date and tide sections are tinted blue for the visual appeal. For the push buttons, the watch uses plastic ones that are rectangular and textured. The sides of the case protrude slightly, acting as crown guards and preventing accidental button presses. On the back, the steel backplate is vertically brushed and held down by 4 screws. The PE resin band has a translucent finish and thankfully isn't excessively long, so it will suit a wide range of wrist sizes. The watch uses a 3473 module, and we'll go over the features for that module now. The first is the tide graph, and this can predict the tide levels throughout the day for the location that you entered. It can also show the phases of the moon for the days throughout the month. We'll go over the tide and moon phase feature in more detail later because I want to put it to the test to see if it's accurate, but for now let's move on to the chronograph. The chronograph has a duration of 24 hours and also has split time measurements. It has a countdown timer with an auto repeat function, and this can be set to count down in duration from 24 hours to 1 minute. There are 3 alarms built in, and the first alarm has a snooze function. Finally, it also has dual time, so you can track the time in a second time zone. The backlight is amber in colour, and you can set it to stay on from 1.5 seconds or 3 seconds with each button press. The light source comes from a single LED at the left of the screen. Let's get back to the main feature of the WS-1100H, which is the tidal information and moon phase data. The watch comes pre-programmed with the information for Tokyo in Japan. However, you can set it for any tidal site around the world, the proviso being that you have the information on hand. The information that you'll need to provide for your chosen location are the UTC differential. In other words, the time difference between your location and the UTC time, formerly known as Greenwich Mean Time. The second information is your site's longitude from GPS coordinates. Both of these pieces of information can be obtained with a quick Google search. The third piece of information that you need to enter is the longitudinal interval, which very roughly speaking is the time difference between one high tide and the next. The instruction manual does give you this information for popular tide sites around the world. You can pause this video to see if your area is included in the list. The country where I live, which is Ireland, wasn't in the list, and I needed to get the information for the tidal site of Dublin. Luckily, the information was easy to obtain, at least for me, and I found a site covering many areas in UK and Ireland. I'll leave a link to that website in the description. Armed with the newly acquired information, I entered the tidal site data for Dublin, and this only took me a minute or so to do. Now that the data had been entered, I wanted to check how close the watch was to official records. It is January the 5th as of the time of recording, and the official records is predicting the first high tide at nearly 6 in the morning. There's a low tide at 11:30 AM and a second high tide at 6 PM. Now let's see what the watch is predicting. As you can see, the date on the watch is reading January the 5th. Now let's move the function onto the tide graph mode. And it's correctly predicted the first high tide at 6 o'clock in the morning. You can only increase the tide times on the watch in hours, so we should predict the next low tide to be at either 11 or 12 in the morning. And again, the time for the first low tide is pretty close to the official records. Next, we'll move the time to 6 in the evening to see if it predicts the second high tide. Again, the watch matches the official records. That was a successful test for the watch. Next, we'll test the moon phases. We'll move the watch onto moon phase mode and compare it against official records. The watch should predict a new moon on January the 11th. Moving on to January the 18th, there should be a first quarter. And again, it's correct. Finally, the watch should predict a new moon on January the 25th. Which it does correctly. For a watch costing well under $30 US, the WS-1100H does pack in a lot of features. The moon and tide graph data may at first appear to be gimmicky, but provided it's set up correctly, it does work and is surprisingly accurate. This feature may be useful to sailing or surfing enthusiasts, but I quite like the watch alone based on its looks. Therefore, I think it's worthy of a place in the collection. Thanks for watching, folks. Subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll catch you next time.